On October 19th, 1781, British General Charles Cornwallis surrenders to American General George Washington and French General Jean-Baptiste Rochambeau at Yorktown, marking the last major battle of the American Revolutionary War. But behind Washington's greatest triumph lay one of his deepest personal tragedies. To understand what happened, we need to rewind to January 1781, 9 months before the victory at Yorktown. George Washington had taken command of the raw and untrained Continental Army nearly 6 years earlier. Washington made his 1781 winter camp near the Hudson River in New York and New Jersey, but the troops were low on food, clothes, and pay. Congress couldn't tax under the Articles of Confederation, and Washington's pleas for supplies often went unanswered. Idle soldiers, unpaid and hungry, grew restless. 2 mutinies erupted, one so serious that Washington ordered the execution of the ringleaders. It was brutal, but effective. No other mutinies followed. All the while, Washington kept watch on Sir Henry Clinton's British forces in New York City, the same city he had lost in 1776, his greatest humiliation. He dreamed of taking it back, but knew he needed one thing to make it possible: the French fleet. France had recognized America's independence in 1778 and joined the fight against Britain. But Washington was frequently frustrated by disagreements with his French allies over military strategy. Down south, the war was raging. Patriot generals Nathaniel Greene and Daniel Morgan played a dangerous game, avoiding full-scale battles with Lord Cornwallis and Bloody Band Tarleton, while weakening and frustrating the British force through guerrilla tactics. Their methods infuriated Cornwallis, Britain's toughest general, known and respected for one thing: he was a fighter. His superior, General Clinton, on the other hand, remained comfortably in New York, living well, attending lavish parties, and preoccupied with his mistress. So when Cornwallis wrote requesting supplies and orders, Clinton simply told him to head for the coast and wait at Yorktown. Cornwallis obeyed his commanding officer, but it's a geographic trap. Yorktown sits on a narrow peninsula in Virginia on Chesapeake Bay, a perfect place to resupply, or to be surrounded. Back in London, the war was becoming increasingly unpopular. King George III and Parliament struggled to keep the population behind this long and very expensive fight. Meanwhile, far to the south, French Admiral de Grasse commanded a powerful fleet in the Caribbean. He sent word to Washington that, with hurricane season coming into full swing, he would be heading north. De Grasse was willing to aid Washington, but not in New York. He wanted to strike at the Chesapeake. For Washington, this meant giving up his dream of retaking New York City, but it was the best opportunity he'd yet had to potentially eliminate a large British army. So, alongside French General Rochambeau and the young Marquis de Lafayette, Washington marched south, toward destiny. Along the way, Washington visited his beloved home at Mount Vernon for the first time in 6 years. There, he was met by his stepson, 26-year-old John Parke Custis, nicknamed Jackie. George and Martha had no children together, but Martha had 4 from her first marriage to Daniel Parke Custis. 2 of them survived childhood: Jackie and a daughter, Martha, whom they called Patsy. Tragically, Patsy died at age 17 from an epileptic seizure 2 years before the war began. Jackie had been just 2 years old when his father died, and just 4 when his mother married George Washington, making the general the only father he had ever known. Washington loved Jackie as if he were his own son. Evidence of how Jackie felt about his stepfather can be found in what he chose to name his only son, George Washington Parke Custis, who, by the way, got the best nickname in the family, Washi. Jackie had long begged Washington to let him serve in the war. After years of pleading, Washington now reluctantly allowed it, unaware of the ramifications of this decision. By summer's end, Cornwallis had fortified Yorktown with earthen walls and cannon forts called redoubts. He wrote Clinton again, noting the vulnerability of his position. Clinton's reply was to stay put, and that reinforcements would soon be on the way. But they weren't. When de Grasse's fleet reached Chesapeake Bay, Clinton finally sent his own ships to help Cornwallis. They never made it. On September 5th, at the Battle of the Chesapeake, the French Navy defeated those British ships and secured control of the bay. Cornwallis was trapped. Rochambeau's troops to the west, Washington's troops to the south, the French fleet at sea. There was no escape. On September 29th, the Allied siege began. Cannon fire rained down day and night, tearing into British defenses. Washington wanted a full direct assault, but Rochambeau insisted on patience. Together, they carefully tightened the noose, digging parallel trenches, inching closer each day. On October 14th, American forces stormed Redoubt No. 10, led by future Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton. Within days, the British lines crumbled. Cornwallis sent a final letter to Clinton, informing him that it was too late and there was no longer any point in Clinton's coming. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered. Too humiliated to appear personally, he sent his second-in-command instead. For Washington, it was the victory of a lifetime, the moment that ensured American independence. But even as the cheers echoed through the camp, tragedy struck. Washington's stepson, Jackie Custis, fell gravely ill with camp fever, likely typhus or dysentery. He died soon thereafter. The triumph of Yorktown became the personal heartbreak of a father. Washington never fully recovered from the loss. He and Martha raised Jackie's surviving children at Mount Vernon, including little Washi, who was just 6 months old when his father Jackie died. A grown-up Washi built his own estate, Arlington House, across the Potomac River from Washington, D.C. Washi's daughter Mary Anna Custis, incidentally, would one day marry future Confederate General Robert E. Lee, and Arlington House would become the centerpiece of the Lee estate and plantation. The property was seized by the U.S. government during the American Civil War and is today the location of Arlington National Cemetery. Mrs. Lewis and I visited the cemetery and Arlington House in 2023. The home sits just up the hill from the grave of assassinated U.S. President John F. Kennedy. When there, you can see this, interesting painting of Washi and one of his sisters. Yorktown didn't officially end the American Revolutionary War, as the Treaty of Paris wouldn't be signed until 1783. But the British public had had enough. An army of 7,000 lost at Yorktown, and no appetite to continue. The dream of crushing the rebellion was over, and Sir Henry Clinton was widely and rightfully blamed for the failure, although he tried to point fingers at Cornwallis, mostly unsuccessfully. The world's most powerful empire had been defeated, not by might, but by persistence, strategy, and unlikely alliances. The siege of Yorktown was more than a military victory. It was a turning point in world history and a reminder that triumph often walks hand in hand with tragedy. For George Washington, it was the moment he proved to the world that freedom could win, even at the cost of something irreplaceable. Here are other events that happened today in history. In 1812, Napoleon Bonaparte's starving French army begins its long retreat out of Russia. In 1943, during World War II, the Suluk people of northern Borneo revolt against the Japanese. In 1982, automaker John DeLorean is arrested in a $24 million cocaine deal, but is later acquitted. In 1985, Norwegian band a-ha hits #1 with Take On Me, thanks to an iconic music video. Also in 1985, the first ever Blockbuster video rental store opens in Dallas, Texas. In 1991, a grass fire ignites in California's Oakland Hills and becomes a huge wildfire that kills 25. In 2024, John Kinsell Jr., one of the last Navajo code talkers, dies in Arizona at age 107. And now it's time for our Today in History quiz. Which composition was performed at the 1973 opening ceremony for the iconic Sydney Opera House? Beethoven's Ninth Symphony? Ravel's Bolero? Vivaldi's The Four Seasons? Or Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik? Liked this look at Yorktown? Then you'll love this one about the treaty that officially ended the war, where you'll learn why the famous painting of the signing was never finished. Tap the screen to keep the story going on Today in History.